The topic at hand is new global framework released by the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. तो दो तीन चीजें हम यहाँ पे पढ़ेंगे जो कि बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है प्रीलिम्स के एस्पेक्ट से, ठीक है। तो we'll be focusing on what is United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. It is a convention, is it a treaty, is it an organization, ठीक है। तो we'll be reading that. तो UNCBD is very important. Is India a party of it? What is the treaty or the convention legally binding? ठीक है, we'll be dealing with all that. Why is this in news? Because United Nations Convention on Biodiversity Secretariat has released a new global framework for managing the nature through 2030. ठीक है, 2010 में 2010 में ओके एक फ्रेमवर्क यूनाइटेड नेशंस कन्वेंशन बायोडाइवर्सिटी ने एक्सेप्ट किया था। उस फ्रेमवर्क का मेन थीम था लिविंग इन हार्मनी, ठीक है, इन हार्मनी विद नेचर, ठीक है। This was the theme of this the framework that was adopted in 2010 for 1 decade, ठीक है। मतलब 2010 में एक फ्रेमवर्क एक्सेप्ट किया या फ्रेमवर्क डिजाइन किया जिसको सारी पार्टीज जो कि यूनाइटेड नेशन कन्वेंशन बायोडाइवर्सिटी की पार्टीज है, 196 मेंबर्स है इस ट्रीटी में या इस कन्वेंशन में, तो इवन इंडिया इज अ मेंबर, ठीक है। तो 2010 में एक कन्वेंशन या एक फ्रेमवर्क का मीनिंग क्या होता है? फ्रेमवर्क मीन्स द आउटलाइन ऑफ आवर विजन या आउटलाइन ऑफ आवर स्ट्रैटेजी या एक्शन प्लान, ठीक है। दैट फ्रेम वाज अडॉप्टेड इन 2010. It was for 1 decade till 2020. Now the 2020 has crossed. And what was the theme of that framework? Living in nature with harmony. मतलब humans and nature in harmony. That was the theme. There was a framework. उस framework में बहुत सारे चीजें थी, targets थे, specified goals थे, strategies थी, tools and techniques थे. So as to how are we going to manage our nature and as to how we are going to use the biological resources to the benefit of the humankind. At the same time, how are we going to sustainably develop it, ठीक है? As to our use should not exploit the nature so that it makes the whole system unsustainable, ठीक है। फिर 2015 में सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल्स आ गए, ठीक है। उसके बाद नाउ द डेकेड हैज पास्ड एंड आफ्टर 2020 वी नीड अनदर फ्रेमवर्क फॉर अनदर डेकेड। तो ये फ्रेमवर्क जो है अभी जो नया वाला फ्रेमवर्क आया है, दैट इज द फ्रेमवर्क फॉर दिस डेकेड 2021 to 2030. ओके, दिस इज द सिंपल अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ द होल। ये फ्रेमवर्क है क्या एंड व्हाई हैज इट बीन रिलीज्ड? It is a draft proposal, ठीक है, which aims to align the framework of Biodiversity Convention, ठीक है। Now United Nations Convention on Biodiversity, it is a convention, ठीक है, although it is a legally binding treaty, ठीक है। It is a treaty that is legally binding. Legally binding मतलब all the parties are legally bound to accept the provisions once they have ratified the treaty, ठीक है। India also ratified this treaty. And in the pursuance of that ratification, India formed a National Biodiversity Authority (NBA) that is headquartered in Chennai. Okay, and a Biodiversity Act 2002 was passed. ठीक है, और 2003 में National Biodiversity Authority was formed. So we will be seeing as to what is the framework and what are the details of the framework and how are we going to manage our how are we going to manage the resources that we are exploiting from nature and so that the sustainable development of these resources is maintained, ठीक है। ठीक है, तो ये लोगो है यूनाइटेड नेशंस कन्वेंशन ऑन बायोडाइवर्सिटी का, ठीक है। तो व्हाट इज कन्वेंशन ऑन बायोडाइवर्सिटी? इट इज अ लीगली बाइंडिंग ट्रीटी अंडर यूएनईपी, यूनाइटेड नेशंस एनवायरनमेंट प्रोटोकॉल, ठीक है। सॉरी, नॉट प्रोटोकॉल बट प्रोग्राम, यूनाइटेड नेशंस एनवायरनमेंट प्रोग्राम के अंदर में यूएनईपी इज अ होल अम्ब्रेला प्रोग्राम, ठीक है। इसमें बहुत सारी ट्रीटीज, कन्वेंशन, प्रोटोकॉल्स हैं। अब उनमें से एक ट्रीटी है कन्वेंशन ऑन बायोडाइवर्सिटी, ठीक है। दैट ट्रीटी इज लीगली बाइंडिंग ऑन ऑल द मेंबर्स दैट साइन द ट्रीटी, ठीक है। यूएनईपी का मेंबर होना इज नॉट द ओनली प्री रेक्विजिट, ठीक है. A country can be a member of UNEP, but still it cannot sign the Convention on Biodiversity. Then it will be not obliged to follow the rules that are set under the Convention on Biodiversity. ठीक है. But 196 members, ठीक है, 196 members have signed and ratified, signed this treaty, and they are members of this treaty. ठीक है. 150 members have ratified. ठीक है. India is one of them. ठीक है. अगर एक किसी भी ट्रीटी के बारे में, ठीक है, लाइक देयर आर 196 मेंबर्स, तो जरूरी नहीं है कि 196 मेंबर्स उसको रेटिफाई करें. ठीक, रेटिफाई करने का मीनिंग होता है, साइन करने का मीनिंग होता है, यस आई एम विलिंग टू गेट इनटू द प्रोविजंस ऑफ दिस ट्रीटी. बट व्हेन आई रेटिफाई द ट्रीटी, दैट मीन्स आई एम विलिंग टू टेक द लीगल ऑब्लिगेशन एंड आई एम गोइंग टू इम्प्लीमेंट दिस ट्रीटी. ठीक है. तो हर ट्रीटी में एक सर्टेन परसेंटेज होती है, लाइक 40%, 50%, है ना. तो दैट विल बी डिसाइडेड एज पर द ट्रीटी. तो एक सर्टेन परसेंटेज ऑफ अगर मेंबर साइन कर देते हैं या रेटिफाई कर देते हैं उस ट्रीटी को, तो दैट ट्रीटी कम्स इनटू फोर्स वेदर द अदर मेंबर्स रेटिफाई और नॉट. ओके. तो 40 to 50%, तो फॉर दिस ट्रीटी 150 आउट ऑफ 196 मेंबर्स हैव रेटिफाइड इट. ठीक है. इवन इंडिया. इसका अब सेक्रेटरीट कहाँ पे है? मॉन्ट्रियल. मॉन्ट्रियल इज इन कनाडा. ठीक है. मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल, यहाँ पे मॉन्ट्रियल से एक इंपॉर्टेंट रिवीजन हो सकता है. मॉन्ट्रियल प्रोटोकॉल इज रिलेटेड टू ओजोन डिप्लीटिंग सब्सटेंसेस. ओके. साइंड इन 1992. अब 1992 में बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट कन्वेंशन हुआ था या समिट हुई थी, दैट इज कॉल्ड रियो अर्थ समिट. ठीक है. रियो अर्थ समिट. Rio Earth Summit was held in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Okay, and that was also called Earth Summit because major Agenda 21 was signed in this Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is nothing but 21 agendas for the sustainable development of the planet. ठीक है. उसके बाद ही इवोल्यूशन ऑफ ये सारी जो ट्रीटीज हो ना वो स्टार्ट हो गए. लाइक क्योटो प्रोटोकॉल आ गया इमिशंस को कंट्रोल करने के लिए, कन्वेंशन ऑन बायोडाइवर्सिटी आ गई बायोडाइवर्सिटी के लॉस को कंट्रोल करने के लिए. ठीक है. तो फ्रॉम 1992 द होल सिनेरियो और द होल सिस्टम ऑफ एनवायरमेंटल एक्टिविज्म चेंज्ड ड्रास्टिकली. ठीक है. साइंड इन 1992 एंड केम इनटू फोर्स इन 1993. ठीक है. India has also ratified the convention. It has 196 members. In the pursuance of the convention, India has implemented the domestic act, that is Biodiversity Act 2002. And in the pursuance of this act, NBA, National Biodiversity Authority, was also formed in 2003. It was formed in 2003. The headquartered in Chennai. ठीक है. अब what is biodiversity? ठीक है. It's very important to understand कि what is biodiversity. ठीक है. And why do we need to conserve our biodiversity? ठीक है. तो biodiversity का मीनिंग सिंपल है. ठीक है. डाइवर्सिटी मीन्स मल्टीप्लिसिटी या प्लूरैलिटी ऑफ प्रेजेंस ऑफ डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ स्पीशीज, दैट इज कॉल्ड बायोडाइवर्सिटी. अब डाइवर्सिटी भी कई प्रकार की हो सकती है. ठीक है. द फर्स्ट वन इज कि लाइक डाइवर्सिटी कैसी है? ह्यूमंस प्रेजेंट है, एनिमल्स हैं, ठीक है, फिर प्लांट्स, इंसेक्ट्स, बर्ड्स. तो यहां पे देयर इज अ डाइवर्सिटी. ठीक है. विद इन ह्यूमंस डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ ह्यूमंस. ठीक है. डिफरेंट रेसेस. ठीक है. वाइट, ब्राउन. ठीक है. तो देयर डाइवर्सिटी इज हाई. इफ डाइवर्सिटी इज हाई, तो why we say that there should be higher diversity? Why do we focus on diversity? दो इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें हैं. ठीक है. The first one is कि why do we focus on diversity as such? कि what is the role of diversity? ठीक है. The first one is it provides us with the gene pool. ठीक है. The first one is that it provides us with the gene pool. अब ये gene pool क्या है? जितने ज्यादा स्पीशीज होंगी उतने ज्यादा जेनेटिक म्यूटेशंस की प्रोबेबिलिटी होगी. ठीक है. अगर इन ब्रीडिंग बहुत ज्यादा होने लगती है किसी भी एनिमल्स या किसी भी स्पीशीज में, इन ब्रीडिंग बहुत ज्यादा होने लगती है, तो जीन पूल में चेंजेस बहुत कम होते हैं एंड दैट लीड्स टू डिजीजेस एंड एवरीथिंग. ठीक है. तो जो हमारा सर्वाइवल रेट है, दैट इज अ गुड फंक्शन ऑफ जीन पूल. the diversity of the gene pool, या the how much our genetic pool is enriched, ठीक है, तो हमारा existence depends upon our gene pool, ठीक है. The second one is ecosystem services, ठीक है, ecosystem services, ठीक. Like there are many plants and herbs that are present in the forests. If we clear the forest for agriculture, these herbs might be lost forever. And these are the herbs that are used in the medicinal preparation, ठीक है. So that is a kind of ecosystem service, ठीक है. तो ये तो basic चीजें हो गई कि why we need diversity, ठीक है. If diversity is compromised, the whole ecosystem gets compromised, ठीक है. Now the three pillars of Convention of Biodiversity are, the first one is conservation of biological diversity. As I said, कि the biological diversity should be conserved and also promoted, ठीक है. The second one is fair and equitable sharing of the benefits of the genetic arising from the use of genetic resources. This is a very important consideration under this convention, ठीक है. We'll be understanding this. This is a very important consideration, okay. And the third one is sustainable use of the components of the biodiversity. The first one is conservation of biodiversity. The second one is sustainable use of biodiversity. And the third one is fair and equitable sharing. Okay. So conservation of biodiversity means simply conserving the flora and the fauna. Okay. The second one is कि sustainable use. If we are using them to our benefit, that use should be not such that it pushes them into the extinction. Okay. That should be sustainable. The third very important point is fair and equitable sharing. Okay. It is also called access and benefit sharing. Okay. Yeah. Access and benefit sharing. Okay. Now what is access and benefit sharing? We need to understand this. This is a very important concept in the biodiversity. For example, this is a forest. Okay. This is a forest. Okay. These are the forest communities living in the forest. These people are dependent on the forest for their livelihood. Okay. These people are dependent on the forest for their livelihood, and they have also been conserving the forest around them. Okay. If some company comes, okay, for example XYZ corporation, if this company goes to exploit these forest resources, okay, and what happens is कि this will destroy the livelihood of these people, okay, that will of course destroy the biodiversity of the region, and at the same time the livelihood of the people who are dependent on the forest will also get destroyed. What access and benefit sharing provides is, the first term is access. Okay. Access means अब इस तरीके के कॉन्फ्लिक्ट से बचने के लिए, ठीक है, एक्सेस एंड बेनिफिट शेयरिंग का कॉन्सेप्ट प्रोवाइडेड है इन द कन्वेंशन ऑफ बायोडाइवर्सिटी. नाउ एक्सेस मींस प्रोवाइडिंग एक्सेस टू द बायोडाइवर्सिटी रिसोर्स, ठीक है, प्रोवाइडिंग एक्सेस टू XYZ कॉर्पोरेशन टू द बायोडाइवर्सिटी रिसोर्स विद इन दिस फॉरेस्टेड एरिया और एनी प्लेस जहां की भी बायोडाइवर्सिटी है, उनको जो इसको कॉमर्शियली एक्सप्लॉइट कर सकते हैं लोग, उनको एक्सेस प्रोवाइड करना, ठीक है. तो दैट विल बी ग्रांटेड टू दीज पीपल, ठीक है. बट द सेकेंड पार्ट इज, द फर्स्ट वन इज प्रोवाइडिंग एक्सेस टू द पीपल हु कैन कॉमर्शियली एक्सप्लॉइट द रिसोर्स ऑफ द बायोडाइवर्सिटी, ठीक है. द सेकेंड वन इज, this company once gets access to this biodiversity resource, it will make pharmaceutical and all, sell to people and earn money. Now when the company earns money, it is also obliged to share a part of that money with these people. That is called benefit sharing. The first is provision of access, the second is provision of benefit sharing. Access, these people will provide XYZ corporation with the access to the biodiversity resource, and they will make sure that this company does not exploit these resources unsustainably. Okay? The second point is कि once the access has been provided, okay, because biodiversity resource is a global common, okay, whatever resources, okay, like and whatever biodiversity resources are, they are common to everyone. ठीक है, a jungle is common to everyone. No one owns the jungle. Any resource that is present within the jungle is a common resource to the all humanity. Understood? In that sense, if these people are not able to commercially exploit this, and these people have the technology, the requisite competence to commercially exploit the resource of the biodiversity, they should be allowed to exploit it on this condition that they are going to share a part of that, the benefit arising from the access to the biodiversity resource, to the people who are at least most affected by that access. Okay, तो अब इस चीज को एक्सेस एंड बेनिफिट शेयरिंग को प्रमोट करने के लिए ही एक इंटरमीडियरी है नेशनल बायोडाइवर्सिटी अथॉरिटी. नेशनल बायोडाइवर्सिटी अथॉरिटी. अब नेशनल बायोडाइवर्सिटी अथॉरिटी का क्या काम है? इट फैसिलिटेट्स, ठीक है, इट फैसिलिटेट्स the applications for access to the biodiversity resources and also provides for the benefit sharing to the people affected. Okay, that means, for example, if someone some company, some medicine making company wants to access some jungle resources, they will have to make an application to NBA. NBA will certify it. NBA will consult with these people, ठीक है, and after the consultation of Gram Panchayat, they will provide the access to that resources to that company, and then their company will be providing a portion of their sales to these people through NBA. This is called access and benefit sharing. This is the most important provision of the Convention on Biodiversity. Okay, this is the most important provision on the Convention of Biodiversity. Okay, so I hope you understood this. Now we are talking about the framework that has been proposed. अभी तक तो we are talking about what is convention, what is this convention about, what are the features of the convention of the biodiversity, and what is the India's role, what are the main points of convention of biodiversity like access and benefit sharing. Now we will be talking about the proposed framework. What is the proposed framework? The proposed framework has three basic points. ठीक है, the first one is reducing threats to biodiversity. ठीक है, the second is sustainable use. The third one is tools and solutions. The first one is reducing threats to biodiversity. What should be our aim? Our aim should be to reduce the threats that the biodiversity faces. The second one is the progression over that, as to first we have reduced the threats, now how are we going to sustainably use the biodiversity resource? Okay? And the third one is what are the tools and techniques to do that. This is a progressive steps for the actions that have been proposed under the framework. The first one is reducing threats to biodiversity. Now for prelims point of view, this is an important point. This whole column is important. Why? Because question ऐसे आ सकता है, which of the following is a major threat to the biodiversity loss? ठीक है, land sea use change, land use change, climate change, pollution, overexploitation and invasive species. Now invasive species are very important. ठीक है, we have all ठीक है, invasive species are very important. In one of my previous lectures I talked about Lantana camara, that is an invasive ornamental flower that came to India, ठीक है, and now it is found everywhere. तो सबसे important जो biodiversity loss के लिए सबसे important factor है, the first one is land use and sea use change. The second one is habitat destruction. ठीक है, habitat destruction. Okay, habitat destruction basically amounts from land या sea use change. ठीक है, अब habitat destruction का example क्या है? Destruction of the rainforests for plantation of palm trees. ठीक है, India is the largest importer of palm oil in India. It is the largest consumer of palm oil. ठीक है, and to serve India's palm oil needs, the rainforests in Indonesia and Malaysia have been wiped off. ठीक है, तो इन rainforests में बहुत high biodiversity थी that has been wiped off to plant palm trees. ठीक है, now that amounts to land use change because the land was earlier used as a forest, now it is used for plantation. So of course land use sea use change basically amounts to habitat destruction. ठीक है, the second one is invasive species. The invasion of species that is not native to that particular ecosystem, will destroy because it will have no competitor in that ecosystem, and that will lead to destruction of and damage of the biodiversity. ठीक है, over exploitation, of course, pollution and climate change. ठीक है, these are the threats that the biodiversity faces. Okay, now sustainable use means biodiversity is the basic of our existence. ठीक है, बायोडाइवर्सिटी इज द बेसिक टू आवर एग्जिस्टेंस. अगर बायोडाइवर्सिटी खत्म हो जाएगी तो वी कैन ईट ओनली वन क्रॉप या ओनली टू क्रॉप. ठीक है, तो फॉर दैट सस्टेनेबल यूज इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. फूड, वाटर एंड हेल्थ एंड शेयरिंग ऑफ बेनिफिट्स. दिस इज द methodology of sustainably using the what? Biodiversity resources. And the third one is, what are the tools and techniques? The first one is, under the tools and techniques, incentives and solutions, providing incentives. ठीक है, providing incentives for biodiversity conservation. इसका example क्या है? For some tribes, ठीक है, they started hunting the hornbill in Nagaland, ठीक है, and Arunachal Pradesh. Later on, they were incentivized through financial and other methods to conserve those very species they used to hunt, and now they are leaders of the conservation of that particular species of hornbill. ठीक है, तो incentives and solutions. Okay, laws and regulations like Wildlife Protection Act 1972, Environment Protection 1986. Biosafety is a very important feature. Cartagena Protocol, ठीक है, under the biosafety means biosafety का मतलब, biosafety is a very broad term. ठीक है, it involves genetic engineering. ठीक है, it involves hybrid formation, it involves the transmigration of living resources, living modified organisms. So that is the whole biosafety aspect. ठीक है, behavior change, persuasion leading to change in behavior of the people. ठीक है, sustainable production and consumption. That is also, of course, sustainable production and consumption. Now, the three major threats that biodiversity faces are alien species, loss of nutrients, and finance. मतलब these were the proposed action targets, and now they were the proposal for the action as to how we have to proceed for the biodiversity conservation, and these are the targets that have been set for 2030 and 2050. तो पहला टारगेट है alien species. This flower is called Lantana camara. This is the alien species that India faces. ठीक है, 50% reduction of rate of introduction of alien species by 2030. ठीक है, 2030 तक जो रेट ऑफ इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ एलियन स्पीसीज है उसको रिड्यूस करना by 50%. ओके, द सेकंड वन इज लॉस ऑफ न्यूट्रिएंट. लॉस ऑफ न्यूट्रिएंट का मतलब जो लैंड यूज चेंज है उसकी वजह से न्यूट्रिएंट्स गेट्स लॉस्ट. ठीक है, वेरी सिंपल एग्जांपल इज मोनोक्रॉपिंग की वजह से बहुत सारे न्यूट्रिएंट जो है वो अर्थ के लॉस हो जाते हैं. इवन इरिगेशन, ओवर इरिगेटेड फ्लड्स की वजह से जो टॉप सॉइल है दैट गेट्स वॉश्ड अवे, and the nitrogen and the phosphorus that has been already fixed by the microbes also gets lost away. So nutrient loss is also major biodiversity threat. ठीक है, the reduce nutrient loss by at least 50% by 2030. Use of pesticides to be reduced by 2/3 of today's use by 2030, and eliminating the dumping of plastic waste, because plastic waste leads to leaching of certain kind of chemicals that leads to the loss of nutrient power of what? The soil. Okay, now how are these going to be achieved? उसके लिए finances, क्योंकि majority of these resources या majority of the biodiversity threat is faced by the developing nations. Moreover, the developed nations have capacity, है ना, and they have finances also to counter the change in biodiversity. But due to the poverty and the low scale technologies, you know, and the development of low scale technologies in the developing nations, the biodiversity threat is relatively higher in the lower income groups countries. ठीक है, तो what is proposed is increased flow of the finances to the tune of $200 billion by 2030 to the developing countries. ठीक है, for their, अब यहाँ पे again it comes the concept of common but differentiated responsibilities. ठीक है, बिकॉज बायोडाइवर्सिटी का एक्सप्लॉइटेशन भी ज्यादा किया है डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज ने, दैट्स व्हाई दे आर डेवलप्ड, ठीक है, एज कम्पेयर टू द डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज. नाउ डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज आर इन द फेज जहां पे उनको बायोडाइवर्सिटी का एक्सप्लॉइटेशन करना है सो दैट दे मे डेवलप देमसेल्व्स. अब they, while they are in the phase of development, they will of course be putting a strain on, a greater pressure on the resources of the biodiversity. To counter that, what needs to be done is that higher upscaled technology needs to be transferred to the developing countries, and for that the finances to the tune of $200 billion needs to be provided to the developing countries by 2030. That is the goal of this whole convention, the framework that has been adopted for convention on biodiversity. Okay, that is all for the global framework.